Really what everybody talks about with the A380 is the onboard shower. It's insane. There's a shower spa that you get if you're a first class passenger. You actually get 5 minutes of hot running water while you're actually in the shower. Showering on a plane is crazy.
Hey there, Points people. You just heard a clip from Pat from Points Pat on Instagram and TikTok. Pat has been creating content about points and miles since 2020, primarily on TikTok. Pat has traveled to more than 40 countries and has flown in some of the world's best airplane seats using points and miles. We're talking the Singapore A380 suites, Emirates First Class Game Changer, Lufthansa on the 747, and more. And in this episode, expect to hear about the Emirates experience on the First Class Game Changer versus the A380, recent changes to Emirates award seat policy for first class, how you can still book these seats on points even though it's more difficult now, and so much more. And if you are in the market for a new card to earn points so you can travel like Pat, check out geobreezetravel.com/cards. And if you're not sure what card is right for you, I offer free credit card consultations at geobreezetravel.com/consultations. We'll send you personalized recommendations based on your particular travel goals, budget, and lifestyle. And now, on with the show. Hey, Pat. Welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here and to talk about the incredible trip that you just took with Q Suites and the Emirates Game Changer, and how it might be a little bit more difficult now for people who want to do that, but not impossible. But before we jump into all of that, tell us a little bit about you and how did you get into the world of points and miles?
Yeah. Thanks for having me again. So a little bit about me. I am a points and miles creator. I've been primarily posting on TikTok over the past couple of years. Really started my journey back in 2020, creating kind of content just that I always thought was a little bit useful. I had just graduated college, kind of actually started the whole points and miles thing as a senior in college. So wanted to start posting and trying to create content that is relatable for maybe the person that just graduated and figuring out how they want to travel more. So I was posting on 2020 quite a bit, definitely kind of picked up a little bit, which was really cool and nice to see. And then just launched kind of like my little rebrand as Points Pat back of April of 2024. Previously, it was known as like Travel Hack Pat on TikTok. So switched it up a little bit. Points and miles was kind of like the main thing that I always focused on. So wanted to really just make sure that that was kind of like the thing that I was always covering.
What were some of the first trips that you ever took with points and miles?
Yeah, I vividly remember it. So it was actually over to Japan. It was when I was a senior in college. So I signed up, actually got approved for the Delta Sky Miles Gold cards. My first card was a Hilton card, built up credit, was always trying to get like a premium card, but as a college student, it's a little bit tough. Ended up actually getting approved for the Delta Sky Miles Gold card, which was really, really nice. And then Delta was actually running a flash sale where it was 75,000 points round trip in Premium Select, which, as you probably know, is like Delta's premium cabin, not Delta One, but still really, really nice. That was actually my first time ever not flying even economy ever in my life. So went over to Tokyo, also got to visit Seoul while I was there, went down to Kyoto. Absolutely amazing. Loved it. Like probably would have never been able to do that in college without learning how to use points. I think the taxes and fees on the ticket were like right around $150. So pretty minimal for that kind of a round trip redemption. But yeah, that was kind of like the first one.
That is a big first redemption.
Yes. Well, international, I guess. I'm sure there's maybe like a domestic trip here or there, but that was, I think, like the first one I definitely remember.
Where does it go from there? How did it kind of evolve from the first trip that you had booked, opening a Delta card, all the way up to some of your more recent trips, which are very impressive?
Appreciate that. Yeah. So at the time, was really trying to figure out how I can kind of start getting some of those transferable points cards. I think that was something that I always knew I wanted to get to, but as a senior in college, didn't necessarily have like the best credit history just because everything was so fresh, so new. So took some time kind of building up with like having the Delta card for a while, also having the Hilton card. And then after I got kind of like my first job out of school, the very first transferable card that I got was the Amex Gold card. So that's kind of like what opened the door for me with being able to kind of like transfer points, things like that. I stuck in the Amex ecosystem for a bit and actually opened up the Platinum like a couple months later as well. So I had the Platinum and the Gold card. Things went a little bit crazy after that. Kind of started redeeming some cool trips and all that, and wanted to make sure that I was able to kind of refresh my point balance every time that it essentially was dropping quite a bit with the redemptions. So then, of course, opened the Chase Sapphire Preferred, the City Strata Premier. This has been over the course of a couple of years at this point. So it's not like all at once. I was being responsible with the way that I was doing it, but always just trying to get transferable points cards and all that sort of stuff. So the first time I ever flew business class as well, I remember that it was actually with an American Airlines card that I opened. It was over to Hawaii, which was amazing experience. That was super cool. COVID happened right after I took that trip. So obviously put a dent in my travel plans. I graduated in 2019. So COVID happened in 2020. That kind of put a dent in just traveling for a while. And I had all these points, right? So had tons of points, wasn't really using them, wasn't doing a whole lot of travel, but always, 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 and I'm sure you might know this too, was looking for like, what would be a really, really cool first class trip to do? I've always wanted to do that. I have all these points that are just sitting in my account. And I used to watch Casey Neistat on YouTube quite a bit. And he has all of those really cool like flight reviews with Emirates and all that sort of stuff that went super viral. And that was my first time ever seeing Emirates. At the time, I remember I was like, I'm never going to be able to book this. It's so expensive. It's crazy. Like there's zero chances that I'm going to be able to do this. And finally figured out with points, it's a lot more attainable. So my first trip kind of like in a very, very premium first class cabin, I was in April of 2022. I booked it within like 5 days of departure, which is a little bit tight. But as you probably know with Emirates, you kind of got to be really far out or really close together. And it was the Fifth Freedom route from JFK over to Milan. When I booked it, it was 87,000 Emirates miles. So transferred those over from American Express. $100 in taxes and fees. I think like a one-way ticket looking at that same flight was like well over 10K, which was crazy. And that was insane. That was like the coolest thing I think I had ever done. I mean, I was only like 25 at the time. And I think a lot of my friends around me were just like, how are you doing this? All that sort of a thing. And yeah, I think after I flew that, it was more of like, this is like an amazing experience. I had been posting on TikTok for a couple months at that time pretty consistently. And that was what started like, hey, this could potentially go somewhere, basically.
Are you only needing to find one ticket at a time, or how many people are traveling when you are booking points redemptions?
Yeah, great question. So I was also big into the backpacking scene at the time. The crazy story about that is when I flew Emirates First Class, I actually stayed when I landed in Milan in like a 10-person hostel dorm room. So that was just the polar opposite that I think you can get from Emirates First Class experience. So for the most part, all of my redemptions have kind of been traveling solo. That's typically what I've done for points redemptions. I think with first class, it's a lot easier to find one seat versus two seats. And that's traditionally kind of just, I guess, what's really been kind of like going on.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So did you say you flew Emirates Business or First Class?
Yeah. So first class on the A380, that was in April 22.
Did they have the chauffeur take you to a hostel?
No. So I didn't have that. And I can't remember. I believe I looked into it, maybe not as much, but I know with points redemptions, I think they switched it, right? Where like you couldn't necessarily have the chauffeur. It was one way or another, but I think I looked into it and I couldn't do it for some reason.
All right. So what is the difference between the regular Emirates First Class on the A380 versus the Game Changer on the B777? Because people who aren't av geeks, they're like, what are these plane numbers? And are the A380s always the ones that people talk about and the ones we should go for? Or what are the product differences between the two experiences?
So I actually just did like a little comparison video a few days ago about this because that's a very common thing I think that people ask, especially for when you're looking at Emirates First Class on YouTube or whatever it might be. There's lots of different versions that you might see that kind of pop up. So with the A380, that is something, well, Emirates in general, they fly the most A380s out of any airline in the world. I'm sure you probably know that too. And that's, I think, the more common type that you might be flying if you're booking Emirates First Class. Now, when I'm saying common type, I'm not saying like it's bad by any means. It is insane. Like it is probably like one of the coolest flight experiences in the world. With the A380, not only are you going to have an amazing, very private seat, you're going to have that gold minibar right next to you on the left and a big TV. But really what everybody talks about with the A380 is the onboard shower. It's insane. There's a shower spa that you get if you're a first class passenger. You actually get 5 minutes of hot running water while you're actually in the shower. Showering on a plane is crazy. First and only time I've ever done that, obviously. So that's really, really cool. And the bathroom's gigantic. A little kind of thing that's pretty cool too is when you walk out of the shower spa, there's a little tiny cup of tea kind of like waiting for you. So they try to really get into like the Zen relaxation, special experience. And then what's also cool on the A380, and this is actually a thing if you're a business class passenger as well, is there is an onboard bar and lounge in the back of the business class cabin. So you're kind of able to experience that. The biggest differences between the A380 and the Game Changer is that I think the A380 is very much a social experience, right? So if you can find two seats and like you're picking, and I guess you have that option for whatever reason, I would probably lean towards the A380 because it's not as private or exclusive, and you can hang out on that bar with whoever you might be traveling with, and having that shower is pretty cool. And on the flip side of that, with the Game Changer, so the Game Changer, I actually just booked last month. So that was kind of like my most recent points trip. Transferred over 163,000 points over to Emirates. It's pretty expensive on the taxes and fees, no matter what route you're flying. Only 9 aircraft in the whole world basically have this configuration. So it's very exclusive. And this is kind of what Emirates calls like their new first class product. They're refurbishing a lot of like other 777s right now, but with the Game Changer, it's like the biggest refresh. Biggest way to explain the Game Changer, wild. I've never seen anything like it. So with the Game Changer, it is a floor to ceiling floor to ceiling wall. It is fully enclosed. No other seat in the entire world basically has that unless you're flying Etihad's Residence. Etihad Residence, you can't really book with points, right? You have to kind of upgrade that whole little thing. So the Game Changer is basically like the most, I don't want to use the word confined, but like the most private cabin that I think you can book with points. It's huge. It's a lot bigger than the A380 seat. It's got some pretty cool things in it as well. So like everything can kind of be controlled in the cabin as far as temperature, as far as lighting. It has a zero gravity seat. It's just insane. But on the flip side of that, it is so private. I think if you were traveling with someone else, it would be a little bit tough to enjoy because the door shuts completely. Like you're kind of just like in a suite. Where with the A380, you could pop over, say hi, whatever it might be. I'm not going to say a single bad thing about either of them, though, because they were both just incredible experiences.
What does a zero gravity seat feel like? Does it feel like you're in a like floaty pool with like the super salt water?
Yeah, it's weird. That's probably a good way to describe it. It feels like it just feels light, right? So I feel like with a lot of like business seats, first seats, you're not in a bed, right? So it's like some people talk about it being comfortable, not being comfortable, whatever it might be. I mean, we're using points. So like for me, it's like anything is comfortable that lies flat. But with the Game Changer suite, like the best word to describe it, it's just light. It's just a little bit weird. Like it's very, very unique.
Is the dining experience the same menu for each of them or different?
I believe that it should be similar. I think it's going to depend on where you're flying out of, but like the experience as far as dining, it's got all basically the similarities. So, of course, they have the caviar service, they have the Dom, like the really nice kind of like champagne, wine, drinks, all that sort of stuff. It should be basically the same across all of the flights. I think the catering just might be a little bit different if you're flying out of Dubai versus flying out of New York. So, maybe a couple different meals.
Are the amenity kits exactly the same?
Different. They're still Bulgari, so I do kind of have both of my kits still. The Bulgari cologne actually with Emirates is like my favorite cologne that I've ever had in my entire life. So the April 2022 one just ran out like a couple months ago, but just flew the seat last month. So kind of restocked it basically that way. It was a funny way to do it.
Nice. Pajamas are the same?
Pajamas are the same, exact same.
All right. So now that everybody's excited to one day book this thing, it got more difficult. Can you talk a little bit about some of the recent changes that Emirates made and why we're sad?
Yeah. So that was a really big bummer. And this was in the middle of me posting a lot of content about Game Changer, how to book, all that sort of stuff. So super relevant, right? Because I wanted to help people, hey, you could book this seat as well. And then May 12th, actually, which was not long ago at all, just within the past couple of weeks, they came out with a change where if you are not an Emirates Elite member, you cannot book Emirates First Class through Emirates. That's actually how I booked both of my Emirates First Class flights, and definitely the easiest way to do it. Typically, and Julie, I'm sure you talk about this all the time too, like an airline will always have the most inventory for their own award seats. So even though there would occasionally be partner availability, Emirates will still always have the most. So that was the change. It's definitely a little bit trickier now.
So if somebody wants to still do this, what is the strategy for finding award seats and getting it booked if like you're just a normal American person who happens to have a few points.
Yeah. So the good news is, even since Emirates did that, it's not the be all end all, right? So previously, you were able to actually book Emirates First Class through Qantas and Air Canada's Aeroplan program. Those have not gone away. There are still Emirates First Class award flights out there. Qantas is by far going to be the better value. Like, honestly, I wouldn't even really recommend people looking at Air Canada unless you have hundreds of thousands of points just sitting around. Qantas, I was actually looking earlier today. You can book the JFK to Milan route. It's 107,000 Qantas points, and it's just right over $100 in taxes and fees. Qantas isn't as large of a transfer partner as Emirates. With Emirates, pretty much everyone was a transfer partner. Qantas just has a couple, so you can move points over from American Express, probably the most popular one. I believe you can also move points over from Capital One in City. Big one missing, obviously Chase, so that's a little bit unfortunate. And then also Built is not currently a transfer partner of Qantas.
All right. So you can get around this by booking through Qantas. I would think that loophole is going to close soon, depending on when this episode airs. And I mean, everything's changing by the day. Okay, so you can still book through Qantas, but in case that changes by the time this episode airs, where Emirates is like, wait, you need status to book through our own website, but our partners are releasing those
I know.
inventory. That's not right. What do people do in that case?
Yeah, great question. As far as all the rules still stand, there are a couple options outside of that. Option A, probably the easiest one, and this was actually a very common thing people were doing before this change even happened. You can book Emirates business class, and typically within the day of departure, right before even potentially getting to the airport, you may be actually able to upgrade with points. So that's something that appears to still be in play. To your point, that might be a loophole that might be changing in the near future too. But as far as I know, and as far as the rules stand, that's definitely one of the most popular ways to do it. There's two other ways outside of Qantas, the upgrade, that you can look at this too. The third way, status matching. So Emirates actually has like a pretty generous status match program you can kind of look into. So if you have status with the current airline, Emirates will potentially be able to match that status. Typically, if they are matching that status, you might have to be completing I think it might be like a 2 round trips on Emirates or something like that. So it is a little bit tougher. The easiest way to get Emirates status is actually signing up for their credit card. So it's a $99 fee or $99 annual fee. You will get Emirates Silver status for the first year. So if that is something that you're like, I really, really, really want to do this, probably going to be the easiest way just to do that. If you can't find a partner flight through Qantas, or if you're a little bit skeptical about the upgrade, looking at that credit card option might be potentially a thing that you want to look into, but obviously not going to be for everyone.
Yeah, the status matching exists. We only have a couple data points, but I had a client try it and they denied her. She had
Oh,
Delta
wow.
Diamond. Tried to match over to Emirates Silver. Texted the CEO of statusmatch.com and they don't have any control over it. They just provide the platform. And so somebody at Emirates has to like manually say like, we don't want this person. And I guess they're just eyeballing if you look like a profitable customer or if you look like you're just
Wow.
into award tickets. Not sure on their exact heuristics or algorithm, but it is not an automatic. I have top tier Delta, United, American. They're clearly going to want my money. And she like flies a lot with Delta. There's a lot of money spent with Delta. Denied, unfortunately.
That's crazy. No, I did not know that. And it's good to kind of look at all the data points out there too, right? So like, I know a lot of us are looking at like the Reddit sub posts and all that and flyer talk, whatever it might be. It's crazy. Like, I think that's something that it's just going to get tougher and tougher to book.
Yeah. And if you want to do the upgrade option that you mentioned, so is it still 30,000 points to upgrade from business to first on the Milan route?
Honestly, it's been a while since I've looked.
It's been a while since I've been to Milan, a couple of years. So it was 30,000 when I was there. And the way to do this, I think I've shared this on the podcast before, you have to show up to the airport 4 hours early or so and have the points already ready in your Emirates account, which is a little bit risky in case there's not award space. Because you're taking a risk one of two ways. One, you move the points over, it's already sitting there, and there's not award space. That's risk one. Risk two is what happened to me, which is you go up to the counter 4 hours before your flight and they say, yes, we have upgrade space to go from business to first class. I move over 60,000 points from Amex to Emirates. and it does not post in time. So 48 hours later, at 60,000 points sitting in my Emirates account, I was back home for a while already and had to figure out what to do those Emirates points, which like I can't get them back into Amex at that point. So you cry a little bit in the Emirates lounge, figuratively, not literally, because you're still flying Emirates business class, which is fabulous. It's an amazing business class product.
Right.
It's not first class, but that there is a little bit of a risk either way. But that is the most common way to get into first class if you have multiple people traveling, because status or
Right.
not, I think they're still not releasing more than one seat in first class these days.
Yep, yep. That's definitely the challenge with a lot of first class seats. Like if you're ever even finding like other ones out there, it's typically like one seat that I'll see. Lufthansa seems to kind of be the exception to that. They'll like drop a lot within 14 days, but actually saw an article today that looks like they're even restricting that kind of just flights departing from Germany. So I think first class in general is just getting a lot more difficult to book.
There are a few different Emirates routes you could try. So I know we've been talking about that JFK to Milan route. If you want the game changer route, Chicago to Dubai is your best bet, really, if you're an American. When I flew first class, it was from Egypt to Dubai. So anything that's like shorter routes within around the Middle East, you might have better options and more availability. When I was booking it, there was still just one seat in first class. I put my husband in business class at that point because I didn't want to deal with the points getting stuck again and the whole upgrade game. But the route where we tend to see more first class availability and possibly two seats available is that fifth freedom flight from Miami down to Bogota. I don't know. I get a lot of YouTube comments being like, you're pronouncing things wrong. And I'm like, that was a super valuable comment. Thanks. Anyway, yes. So booking Miami to Colombia is also a better route that you might be able to find more first class availability on.
Yep, yep, totally agree. Yeah, I always use like some of those award search tools, and I think that's the one that seems to be the most common from the US.
For sure. Are there any other routes with Emirates that people should look into, like fifth freedom flights around the world? There's that Bangkok to Hong Kong one as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty popular one with the game changer, actually. So the Chicago route is super expensive in terms of points, even if you are looking at Qantas. That was a flight I looked at. It's available still to book to today, but the taxes and fees are crazy. You're paying almost $900 in taxes and fees, plus up to, I think it was like 170,000 Qantas points. But what a lot of people do if they really want to fly game changer is looking at routes from Brussels, Zurich, Geneva. All of those will go directly down to Dubai. And that kind of gets you within I think it's between like a 6 and 8 hour flight, depending on which city. So that's a really good amount of time, right? And it's not going to feel too quick. You should still get the full meal service. You should be able to kind of get everything that you might be getting from like a longer flight within that window. So would recommend looking at those routes specifically for the game changer flight. And then the other really popular Fifth Freedom one, it's on the 777 from the US, is from Newark over to Athens. So I always see that actually has more seats available as well compared to New York to Milan. So if you're looking to get over to Europe, basically, and you want to fly Emirates first, look at Newark to Athens. That might have some more seats than New York to Milan.
All great suggestions. So, as far as earning points for Emirates, like you mentioned, everything transfers over there. I don't think they have a ton of transfer bonuses, and I don't see tons of point sales. It's not really one that comes up too often whenever I'm reporting on transfer bonuses and point sales. Are you seeing anything different with that?
No, I think it's one of the programs that's stayed away from that. As far as I've been making content, I think there's only maybe been, if even any, one Emirates transfer bonus I've seen. It's very, very rare if there are a couple.
I saw one with Built where there was the 100% transfer bonus. That was once.
Yeah. And that was the one day too. So love Built, but the transfer bonus is there obviously just for rent day. So
Yeah, for sure. All right. If it keeps becoming more and more difficult to book these different aspirational first class products, what's first on your bucket list where you're like, I got to get this before it sells out or they just make it completely impossible? Like La Premiere is the one that tends to be nearly
yeah.
impossible anyway. What else do you think is inching closer to that?
I'd say Singapore's always been pretty protective of their first class flights. Like you can't even book it through another program. You basically have to book it through Singapore KrisFlyer. I would be nervous with Emirates change if that starts happening to some of these other like very premium operators and carriers, right? Like basically allowing first class seats to only be bookable through their own elite members. Was fortunate enough to also try Singapore. It was amazing. The one I really want to try next is Etihad's apartment. I think that would be a really cool first class seat to book. Very limited kind of like on routes that I've seen from the US. Believe that they have JFK direct to Abu Dhabi, but I think that they have it on the A380, but they also have like another plane type. And I was looking at this a couple months ago. It's kind of just tough to basically plan out a seat that's going to be reasonably priced just because some of those can kind of be crazy high. So we'll look at kind of like the apartment potentially. I've always wanted to try ANA or JAL first as well. I think those two are pretty aspirational. Never tried either, but would love to eventually do that, but also know very much that those are very, very difficult seats to book as well.
Which route did you fly with Singapore Suites?
Also a Fifth Freedom. As you can tell, love Fifth Freedoms because they are priced pretty well. So it was the A380 JFK to Frankfurt. It was right before they made the switch. Now it's not kind of like the new suites, it's the old suites, but still amazing soft product. Can't say enough good things about Singapore either. I don't think it's going to be too much of a difference, but that was in 2023.
These days, if you want to fly the new version of the Singapore Suites, because I also did that route, Frankfurt to JFK, but these days, most popular way that we book this for clients is the Singapore to Sydney route because you can't really fly to the US with this plane anymore.
Right.
Easiest way to book it is probably to hop from Singapore over to India with, I think they operated to either Delhi or Mumbai or both. I don't remember which, but that one has the most inventory for Singapore Suites. Short flight, but if you just want to get all of your B-roll for Instagram and everything, then that one's pretty good. So is the Shanghai route. Hong Kong tends to sell out quite a bit.
Good to know. Yeah, I need to start looking into more of these Fifth Freedom flights and just all this stuff like outside of the US because I think I focus a lot like on US flights, but to your point, I think it's a lot easier to get an award seat when you're over kind of like in Europe or Asia or whatever it might be. Less competitive because all of us Americans have all of these credit card points trying to book like all the really fancy first class seats.
Absolutely. And with the Etihad first class apartments, there is a lot more inventory from London and Paris than from New York over to Abu Dhabi. And it's bookable for 63,000 American Airlines miles or something like that per person one way. It's a really good deal with American Airlines miles.
Yeah. It's one point currency I wish I had more of, right? I think that's the thing everybody's saying in our space. It's just very tough to get American miles without a credit card or flying a lot with them. And it's definitely the best value for a lot of flights. I would love to kind of get some more American miles.
I get mine through Basque Bank, which is hashtag not sponsored, but I use that as my savings account and just put money in there. And instead of earning interest, I get American Airlines miles passively into my AA account every month, which is nice.
I got to look into that. I don't think I've heard of that before. Okay.
Yeah, Basque Bank is good. People also like to book hotels through Advantage Hotels. So if you don't care about hotel status or perks, but you just want more American Airlines miles, you're staying in boutique hotels anyway. If you have an American Airlines co-branded card, you can get 10, 20, 30 American Airlines miles per dollar. So if you need 200,000 American Airlines miles to get executive platinum status, and you're just doing that by booking hotels through the Advantage portal, you probably do it for like $10,000 or less. So that's not too bad. And you do get loyalty points for those as well. Basque Bank, unfortunately, no loyalty points.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That's a really good strategy for looking at American miles, just because again, like I honestly think it's between them and Alaska that has like the best price flights for US domestic programs. So got to look into that.
For sure. So as we kind of wrap up here, Pat, what would you say is your number one advice for people who are looking to level up in points and miles, and especially people who are trying to navigate the world of Emirates with all the changes that are going on?
Yeah. And I'd say like my number one piece of advice would be to just keep staying flexible, right? Time and time again, like devaluations happen. And it's something that I think is even more frequent just over the past couple of weeks with a lot of different programs. So it's not just Emirates, right? Emirates had the devaluation. Hilton just had a huge devaluation. And then actually just saw literally 20 minutes ago that United is having an upcoming devaluation too. So That I think is something to really look into. The reason why you don't want to have all of your points just with one airline or one hotel. Very important to obviously have points that are flexible, transferable. That way, if something does happen, you're not going to be stuck, right? I mean, could you imagine if you only had Emirates points, you were planning on this first class trip, and now what are you going to do with them? So keep your points. And also, I always get this question. It's like, during a transfer bonus, should I transfer all of my points over because this transfer bonus is so high and great? 99.9% of the time, don't do that. If a transfer bonus is happening and you could actually take advantage of a deal and book that flight immediately after you find the award availability, do it. But don't ever transfer over speculatively, because you might transfer over speculatively and 2 weeks later, there's a devaluation. Flexibility, I think, is the number one thing there.
Or you move all of your points speculatively, and then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh God, now all my points are over here, and I could have used that other airline way more, and now they have a transfer bonus. So
Exactly.
fantastic tips. So if people want to learn more from you, where can they find you online?
Yes. So on Instagram at PointsPat, same thing on TikTok, PointsPat. And then you guys can actually check out my website as well. It's just pointspat.com.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Pat, for joining us today.
Yes. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Julia.